At exactly 3:17 every morning, my name is whispered from somewhere inside my apartment, close enough to feel intimate, distant enough to feel wrong. I wake before the sound finishes, heart steady, as if my body expects it. I never hear footsteps, breathing, or movement, only the voice shaping my name carefully, like it is practicing. The clock always clicks from 3:16 to 3:17 as the whisper begins, never early, never late. The first time it happened, I lay still, staring at the ceiling fan, counting its rotations, waiting for fear to arrive. It didn't. What arrived instead was a precise certainty that something had reached me. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't check the time. I didn't call out. I simply listened to the quiet afterward, thicker than silence, and wondered how a voice could sound familiar without belonging to anyone. My days are structured and forgettable in a way I've always found comforting. I wake before my alarm, shower, drink coffee that tastes faintly burned, and leave my apartment at the same time each morning, locking the door without ever checking twice. I work in a municipal records office where the air smells like paper and disinfectant. My job is to verify dates, names, and signatures, correcting small human errors before filing them away. Nothing dramatic happens there, and that steadiness feels earned. During lunch, I sit alone by the window and watch buses idle at the stoplight. People come and go in fragments, sleeves, shoes, reflected faces. I rarely think about them once they disappear from view. After work, I stop at the same corner store and nod at the cashier, who knows my face but not my name. I buy bread, canned soup, and whatever fruit looks least bruised that day. Evenings pass quietly. I cook, eat standing by the counter, and wash dishes immediately, as if delaying would let something pile up inside me. The television stays on low volume, more for light than sound. I read before bed, usually nonfiction, usually history. I like knowing how things unfolded, step by step, with causes that can be traced and effects that can be understood in hindsight. My apartment is small but orderly. Furniture rarely moves. The walls are bare except for a calendar I never update. I know every sound the building makes and when to expect it. At night, I double-check that the windows are closed, not out of fear but habit. The city hum settles into a distant, steady presence that feels almost like company. Sleep comes easily to me, or it used to. I've always trusted my mind to power down without resistance, the way a machine does when you flip the correct switch. Before the whispering began, the nights felt empty in a neutral way. They held nothing for me, asked nothing of me, and returned me to morning unchanged. The whisper didn't frighten me at first because it was so incomplete. It never added a word, never changed tone, never lingered. It said my name once, clearly, then withdrew, leaving the room exactly as it had been. The second night, I noticed I was already awake before it happened. My eyes opened on their own, breath shallow, as if some internal clock had nudged me. When the whisper came, it felt less like a surprise and more like confirmation. I started paying attention to how my name sounded. The emphasis was wrong, stretched slightly at the end, the way someone might say it if they'd only ever read it silently. That detail stayed with me longer than the sound itself. During the day, nothing followed. No fatigue, no headaches, no strange thoughts. I filed documents, bought groceries, waited at crosswalks. The nights felt sealed off from the rest of my life, like a separate, contained system. On the third night, I checked the clock before sleeping. 2:48 glowed back at me. I told myself I'd imagined the timing before. That memory reshapes things without permission. I turned onto my side and closed my eyes. I woke at 3:17 anyway. The whisper arrived from closer than before, not louder, just nearer, as if it no longer needed to cross the room. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with mild irritation. I sat up and listened afterward, waiting for some secondary sound to justify it. Pipes, neighbors, traffic, anything. The building offered only its usual creaks, all slightly off schedule now that I was alert. In the morning, I searched my phone's call history, unsure why. I checked messages, emails, even spam. My name appeared nowhere. That absence felt deliberate in a way I couldn't quite define. At work, I caught myself looking at signatures differently, lingering on familiar names, wondering how often they were spoken aloud. The thought felt intrusive, so I pushed it aside and focused on dates instead. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something small but troubling. I wasn't wondering if the whisper would happen again. I was wondering whether it would sound the same. By the fourth night, I had explanations ready, lined up neatly like files on my desk. Hypnagogic hallucinations, stress, a sleep cycle misalignment. I recited them silently as the clock crept forward, treating the moment like an experiment. When the whisper came, I noted it with clinical detachment. Same timing, same pacing, same soft, careful pronunciation. I reminded myself that the brain is skilled at repetition when it wants to be believed. I downloaded a sleep tracking app and placed my phone face down on the nightstand. If I was talking in my sleep or dreaming loudly, there would be evidence. Data has a way of shrinking things. During the day, I searched articles about auditory hallucinations. Most described chaos, fragmentation, voices overlapping. None of them sounded patient. None of them waited for a specific minute. I adjusted my routine. No caffeine after noon. No screens before bed. I opened the window slightly to let in night air and unfamiliar sounds, hoping to dilute whatever pattern was forming. The whisper continued anyway. I didn't jump or flinch anymore. I listened, counted my breaths, and waited for it to fade. It always did, leaving behind a faint sense of having been addressed. I told myself the timing only felt precise because I was watching for it. Expectation sharpens perception. If I stopped checking the clock, the problem would loosen its grip. So I turned the clock toward the wall. I slept without knowing the time, trusting my rational mind to do the rest. The whisper still came, and somehow I knew it was 3:17. In the morning, the app showed nothing unusual. No recorded sounds. No spikes. Just a smooth line of sleep, interrupted briefly, then continuing as if nothing had occurred. That should have comforted me. Instead, it felt like confirmation that whatever was happening belonged entirely to me, and therefore could be managed, contained, and eventually dismissed. The whisper began to change in ways that were difficult to chart. Some nights it arrived a fraction later, stretched thin as if delayed by distance. Other nights it felt compressed, my name folded into itself before I fully surfaced. I started waking a few seconds earlier than before, eyes opening to darkness, body alert. There was a waiting period now, a suspended moment where nothing happened, and then the sound would arrive, right on cue. Once it came twice. The first was faint, almost hesitant. The second followed immediately, firmer, as if correcting a mistake. I lay still, heart steady, wondering which one counted. I checked the clock again. 3:17 blinked back at me, indifferent. The numbers didn't feel like confirmation anymore. They felt like participation, as if the clock itself was complicit in keeping the schedule intact. The voice began to carry texture. I could hear dryness in it, a slight catch between syllables. It sounded like a throat unused to speaking, or one that had been waiting a long time to try. During the day, I noticed patterns elsewhere. Receipts totaled the same amounts. The bus arrived at the same second each morning. Names in the records repeated more often than they should have. I told myself the mind seeks symmetry when it's unsettled. Once you notice a thing, it multiplies. Still, I began writing the nights down, marking variations with careful, restrained language. On the seventh entry, I wrote that the whisper sounded closer to my left ear. I erased it and rewrote it as direction unclear. The original phrasing felt too intimate to keep. Sleep became segmented. I would drift off, wake briefly, then drift again, all leading toward the same point. The night felt like a corridor narrowing toward a single door. One morning, I found myself saying my own name out loud in the bathroom, testing its shape. It sounded different in my mouth, heavier, less precise than the version I heard at night. The whisper began to linger for half a second longer, as if waiting for acknowledgement. I refused to give it one, keeping my breathing slow, my thoughts deliberately blank. By the 12th night, the pattern no longer felt like repetition. It felt like progression, each small change building towards something I couldn't yet see, but somehow already recognized. The whisper started to feel personal, intimate in a way that was impossible to ignore. It wasn't just my name anymore. It was a reminder of my solitude, of the spaces in my life that no one else occupied. I felt watched, measured, cataloged. One night, it lingered after 3:17, stretching into 3:18, as if testing the boundaries of my attention. I lay frozen, counting my pulse, feeling the room contract around me in a slow, deliberate squeeze. Objects in the apartment began to betray me. A mug out of place, a door left slightly ajar, a chair angled differently than I remembered. The changes were subtle, but unmistakable, as if something moved them when I wasn't looking. I stopped telling friends about it. At first, I had tried casual mentions. I keep hearing my name at night. Their eyes would soften, then dismiss. Their disbelief was more isolating than the whisper itself. The pattern followed me everywhere. At work, I found small notes I hadn't left, precise pencil marks on files. At the corner store, shelves seemed shifted when I returned. Nothing overt, just a quiet insistence that I was being observed. I started noticing the timing elsewhere. My phone's notifications pinged at odd intervals, elevators paused longer, footsteps echoed strangely in hallways. Everything seemed calibrated to remind me that I was alone and being addressed. Sleep became impossible. I lay rigid, staring at the ceiling, listening for the whisper, imagining it behind every closed door, every shadowed corner. My mind supplied it before it arrived, confirming the inevitability of its return. The whisper began to feel like a voice I knew but couldn't recognize, like a memory I couldn't place. Its tone mirrored my own moods, tender when I was calm, insistent when I was anxious, almost intimate in its mimicry. I tried recording the nights. The playback was silent, nothing but static. It was as if the whisper existed solely for my ears, personal and exclusive, tailored to follow me through every room, every breath. By this stage, I understood that the whisper was no longer a strange occurrence. It had become a presence, not a visitor, not a ghost, but something that had learned my habits, my life, and was quietly, meticulously making itself indispensable. Small, inexplicable events escalated. My keys moved between pockets. A window that had been shut opened slightly. Shadows seemed to elongate when I wasn't looking. I began to anticipate its manipulations, but never prevent them. I started talking to it in whispers of my own. Questions, complaints, half-jokes. No response came except the quiet that waited for the next night. The next 3:17, when my name would be called again, softer, closer, unmistakably deliberate. I stopped answering calls from friends because conversation required a version of myself that no longer existed. I was always tired, always listening. Even during the day, silence felt temporary, like something holding its breath. At work, I made mistakes I couldn't explain. Names blurred together. Dates slipped. My supervisor asked if everything was okay, and I nodded too quickly, afraid that if I spoke, something else might answer for me. I tried staying out late, filling the evenings with noise and movement. Cafes, late buses, long walks. No matter how exhausted I was, my eyes still opened before dawn, drawn back to my apartment like a fixed point. I invited someone over once, a colleague who barely knew me. We talked, watched television, shared polite laughter. When they left, the apartment felt wrong, stretched, as if it had briefly accommodated a shape it didn't prefer. That night, the whisper came earlier, not in time, but in my awareness. I felt it forming before it spoke, like pressure behind my eyes. I pressed my hands over my ears. It didn't matter. I stopped sleeping in my bed and moved to the couch, then the floor. The voice followed without effort. The apartment no longer felt like separate rooms, just one continuous space with no edges. I went to a doctor and described the symptoms carefully, neutrally. He asked about stress, about family history. I watched his pen move as he wrote, noting how my name looked on the page. Medication dulled the days but sharpened the nights. The whisper cut through the fog with precision, unchanged, patient. It waited for 3:17 as always, as if honoring an agreement I didn't remember making. I unplugged the clock. I covered mirrors. I avoided speaking my own name aloud. The silence during the day grew heavier, more expectant, as if conserving itself for a single moment. By then, I understood that no one else could enter this with me. Whatever was happening had narrowed until it fit only my life, my routines, my breathing, leaving me alone with something that refused to leave. I found the old file by accident, buried in a misdated box at work, its edges softened by years of handling. The name on the cover was mine. Same spelling, same middle initial. The handwriting wasn't familiar, but it felt deliberate. Inside were reports, evaluations, intake forms. Dates stretched back further than my memory allowed, describing a version of me who arrived somewhere at night, disoriented, repeating a time over and over. 3:17. The notes ended abruptly and signed. One page mentioned a self-addressing response, a coping mechanism designed to stabilize fragmented awareness. Another described a voice used to anchor identity during dissociation. I read those lines several times, feeling something loosen behind my eyes. That night, I didn't wait for the whisper. I spoke my name first, softly, into the dark. It sounded wrong, incomplete, like an echo without an origin. When the whisper came, it sounded steadier than I felt. For the first time, I recognized the cadence. The pauses matched my breathing. The emphasis mirrored habits I'd never noticed, but had always had. It wasn't copying me. It was remembering me. At 3:17, standing in the darkness of my apartment, I understood that the voice wasn't calling me. It was checking that I was still here, still answering, still occupying a life I must have once left behind. The whisper still comes at 3:17, but I no longer wake to it. I'm already awake, waiting, lips parted. Some nights I can't tell if I spoke first or if I'm only remembering that I did. During the day, I catch myself pausing mid-task, listening inward. My name feels less like a label now and more like a signal, something used to keep a boundary intact that I don't fully understand. I stop trying to confirm which voice is mine. The question creates a hollow feeling, like stepping too close to the edge of a thought I'm not meant to finish. It's easier to accept the routine. Last night, the whisper hesitated, just slightly. For the first time, it sounded uncertain. I stayed silent, wondering what would happen if one of us failed to answer, and which one of us that would be.